Hare Krishna, everybody, and welcome to Class 8 of our Sri Isopanisad study. Today we'll be looking at three verses 14, 15, and 16. And we talked about last week the phenomenon of worshiping the creation instead of the creator. So we'll take some reflections on that, but first we'll start with some kirtan.
Come into your comfortable seat, soften your jaw. Breath in, fill up. Open your mouth, exhale, let it go. Opening prayers. Deep breath in. Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva cha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Isopanisad, Shastra Study Group Class Key. Hari Hari Bol.
Om Jnanatimirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Shurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vachakalpatarupyascha Kripasantupya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So let's start with some reflections from last week's class on verses 12 and 13. And we did some reflecting, thinking on, discussing on what it is to worship the creation instead of the creator. How we've done that, how we've seen that happen, what happens when we do that. Take some reflections on that. Because those verses, just to remind us, the verse 13 said, there's one result by worshiping the cause of all causes, and another that you obtain by worshiping that which is not supreme. Don't get the same thing.
I would go. Shamya Pras.
Please.
Krishna. What stood out to me in this is that with sincerity and determination, if we really just believe that everything is part and parcel of Krishna, and we've been hearing this over and over for books upon books and verses, that really Krishna is the creation. He's the creator, not the creation. He's created everything. That if we can just surrender, um, and offer service to Krishna, that we will have a nice life. And we also have the intelligence to be able to do this, but we can also not use our intelligence, and we could easily slip into the material mire, which isn't good.
Thank you. So give me an example, like what is it like? What does it feel like for you? What is it? Well, give me a practical example. What does it look like for you to get into the material mire? Worshiping the creation versus the creator. We know a little bit about like what you said. Just kind of give some support to the idea of worshiping the cause of all causes, the creator, for sure. But what happens if you don't do that? If you put your attention on the creation and make that your central focus? What does that look like for you as a
Yes.
person?
Like lower level, like in the mode of ignorance, in the mode of passion, um just not living my best life for Krishna. Just it feels like I can tell that I'm not regulated. It just doesn't feel as like I'm nourishing the right thing. It feels like, oh, I'm kind of reaching out for other things. And I know Kishori said this before, and I just loved it, trying to fill the God-shaped hole with everything but God. That's what it feels like. If you don't give it all, if you don't believe. And that does happen. I feel like we do ebb and flow in our spiritual practice. At least I know I do.
Mm,
It's a little out of balance. Does that answer it? I've been trying to really
yeah.
think about this too.
There's no wrong answers. I'm just encouraging everyone to really try to do what you did, is just like kind of pin down what it feels like, what an example of that is. So I'm hearing, for example, one thing that happens that you can almost use as a metric to see where your attention is. Is it on the source, or is it on some of the effects of that supreme cause, some of the paraphernalia, some of the material energy? Is you feel like uh, you're trying to fill up something, but it's not actually getting full. It's like if your body is hankering after food and you just give it, um, junk, not real food, no real nourishment. It's your body will give you feedback. So I'm hearing that there's a way in which you recognize when your attention is going towards that which is not supreme, that which is some temporary material manifestation, you don't feel complete. You don't feel satisfied. Great. I mean, not great, but great reflection, great realization. Let's get some more reflections on this principle.
I have an example.
Yes.
So most of you know that I'm working through, a job change. And if I wanted to, I could really worship the money. Like I could worship the offer that gives me the most money, the most prestige, the biggest title, the nicest, lifestyle potential, all those types of things. I could really worship the money instead of what I'm trying to do now, which is worship myself, and not worship myself, but acknowledge that I want a job that I'm happy with, that I can still have the space around me so that I can do my daily sadhana and my other things like that. So that's just another idea that came to mind is, so many people are out there worshiping the almighty dollar, or worshiping their sports team, or, thinking that everything lives and dies in those transactions instead of
Yeah.
seeing the bigger picture.
Yeah, there's an expression, you can tell what somebody really prioritizes by where they put their time and their money. Like we only have limited amounts of each, and their attention. So you bring up like a really practical point, because we have to decide where to live, who to associate with, what kind of job to do. And there are so many different criteria that we can judge that kind of decision, on. And it's like, yeah, I'm hearing you say that in a sense, it would be like very kind of a mainstream, well understood, well appreciated choice to just go with what would make you the most money. It's very straightforward. And that for you would feel like worshiping the creation, because there it is. It's some external energy. But because the idea is that money can give you happiness. So you're like, well, why not just look at what's actually making me happy? And I actually am happier serving Krishna. So I would like to facilitate my service. One of my gurus, he reflected that, over the years, when he decided where to live and what to do, and all these other major choices based on what would facilitate his service to Krishna, he ended up being happier. That's his reflection after, so many decades of those kinds of difficult and challenging life choices. And so that's a good metric. Like, what will facilitate my service to Krishna? What will keep me in Krishna consciousness? What will engage my body, mind, my facilities? What will keep me in Sangha? What will keep me hearing and chanting? Like that kind of consideration um, ends up being a great metric. So that's putting Krishna in the middle, actually, practically. It's like asking that question, well, what will do that? What will actually help me serve Krishna better? Yeah. Good luck with that choice. And I'm so gratified to hear that you're realizing these things. And
Yes, thank you.
that's why we see you on Tuesday nights.
That's right.
Yeah. More reflections?
So going back to mantra 12, I kind of meditated on, because the idea of impersonalism is kind of like an interesting one, because I don't think I've personally ever done like the impersonal thing. I've always had like a form in my head, but I kind of put myself in the position of like, okay, if we were to worship demigods, generally we're asking for stuff, right? Like a lot of people, like that's kind of like demigod worship is kind of like fortune or, children or what have you. And so the whole point isn't to worship for stuff, because that's then worshiping the creation and not the creator. And then the idea of impersonal, I kind of like sat there and I was like, all right, let me actually imagine. And I don't know if I've ever actually done this, being in front of Krishna. Like like, I can see him, he's physically like there. And it like, I couldn't envision it. Like, it was just so like mind blowing. And I said, so if everybody looked at God in that way, this very personal form that like you actually sat there and was like, if I had to bow down in front of Krishna right now and pray or chant, like, no, I just think that would just be like, so I think if we treat all of the things that we do, and especially when we chant, or especially when we're like taking darshan at like legit as a person that's like standing right there and can encapsulate that feeling, I can totally see how mantra 12 talks about like engaging in demigods as ignorance, because it's like the stuff thing. Impersonal, there's no accountability, or just kind of like, it's just this, kind of
Vague.
light, big idea. But like, if you really thought that Krishna was like, ooh, right there, that's a game changer. And he is. So it's like trying to take that mood on. It's like, he is deeply, he's physically like right there next to us. I don't know. It just made my head explode a little bit.
Thank you. Yeah. So just like embracing the reality of, okay, even if I just theoretically accept what if it were true that when I'm chanting Hare Krishna, Radha and Krishna are associating intimately with me. Like I'm right next to them. They're dancing on my tongue, as Prabhupada put it. What would that mean? Yeah, just to kind of like circle back to what you were saying. Yeah, people have typically worshipped the demigods for material advancement. That's why they do it. The impersonalism thing, the psychology is explained in the Shastra that first you try to enjoy the material energy. You try to make yourself the controller and enjoyer, and then you fail because you can't, because you aren't. You're not the central controller and enjoyer. And being frustrated in that attempt, one tries to wipe it out. One tries to make it zero, like either nihilism, there's nothing, like it's all just nothing, it's all void, like kind of a voidistic philosophy, or it's all one, but all these different varieties here, some people are winning, some are losing. All that is just an illusion. It's all nothing. There's no substance behind it. So it's an attempt to kind of like level everything off. And it's due to frustration. One's own personal existence becomes a source of frustration, because everything I've tried for, all my relationships, all the different endeavors, all my hopes, they've all just been illusory, because I'm going for after money or all these things that weren't real. So there isn't anything real. I'm not real either. There's no person behind everything. They're also not real. It's a frustration philosophy. That's the psychology behind it. Yeah. And so, yeah, like not putting, so yeah, there's putting the creation in the center. There is putting like annihilating everything and having everything be zero in the center. And there's putting Krishna in the center. let's say, what if the Shastra was correct? What would that mean for me? What would that mean for my chanting? What would that mean for my darshan? For my hearing Isopanisad? It's profound. Thank you.
Mhm. Yeah, you said impersonalism is less challenging to the ego. Right? So
Yeah, no accountability, as you said.
That's what so many people are gravitated towards
Right.
in having a spiritual practice. And then I was just reading this part in Raghunath's book that Bada Haridas said to him at the Laguna Temple, doubt your doubts.
Mm.
Doubt your doubts, like question those, because our mind, which is for most of us primarily programmed at this point until, some bhakti or some other spiritual practice came in our life, programmed by the ego and manas, that like impulsive mind, I want this, I don't want this, like that desire, right? So it's like that our mind may be creating a story around why something can't be real, right? Or out of fear, out of our ego screaming, being like, no, if you go this way, then I'm not going to be in charge, right? So like to ask questions and all these things, but also to doubt, why am I doubting all these things? And he gives the example of the ant. Badaharidas gives the example of an ant crawling on the counter, and he says, this ant doesn't know that we're here cooking prasad, having this conversation, right? He thinks it's a whole different, he has his own little ant universe and world. So how are we to know? So
Yeah, taking our own kind of like deeply held convictions out of the middle. And that leaves space to receive the message of the Shastra, the devotees, and like consider it and try to apply it a little bit.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you.
Because ultimately we just if we follow that impersonalist view or think that we know it all, we're continuously left like wanting more, or something is still missing, because ultimately we are seeking that eternal divine relationship.
Yeah. To kind of put the material creation in the middle robs us of Krishna, because we may think, okay, even if he's real, what I really want to do is just focus on winning at this game in the material world, more wealth, longer life, whatever the currency is we happen to be intoxicated with temporarily. And the impersonalism thing is, it robs us of Krishna because we deny he even exists. It's like, no, there is no person. I'm not a person. Krishna's not a person. But perfection is just merging into oneness. And that's even more pernicious. It's more dangerous, because it's one thing to kind of put blinders on. Well, even if there is a God, actually what's really important is here. All this matter, But to say that there isn't one, like there can't be one categorically, and to use Shastra to kind of like substantiate, there's no personhood. I'm not a person. There's no spiritual relationship possible. That's like a profound form of cheating oneself. Yeah. So just to kind of continue to where we're at now, verse 14, all these previous verses that say, there's one cause to be obtained by worshiping the Supreme, and another cause that it's obtained by worshiping that which is not supreme. You have to learn ignorance and knowledge side by side. So verse 14, I'll share the screen here. Says, Sambhutam cha vinasham cha yastadvedo bhayam saha vinashena mrityam tirtva sambhutyam mrityam ashnute. One should know perfectly the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, and his transcendental name, form, qualities, and pastimes, as well as the temporary material creation with its temporary demigods, men, and animals. When one knows these, he surpasses death and the ephemeral cosmic manifestation with it, and in the eternal kingdom of God, he enjoys his eternal life of bliss and knowledge. So just like a previous verse said, you have to go out of your way to cultivate knowledge, side by side with ignorance. And Prabhupada made the point that we don't have to go out of our way to cultivate ignorance. It's just part of our existence. We have access to so much material knowledge. We have to go out of our way to cultivate spiritual knowledge. So similarly, this verse is saying we have to know the Supreme Person side by side with the material. Because the verse says, you surpass death, right? And that's what Prabhupada focuses this purport on, surpassing death, and the ephemeral cosmic manifestation. It's a nice word, ephemeral, that which is wispy, doesn't really have substance. It seems to last, but it doesn't. Ephemeral is here today, gone tomorrow. Doesn't really have permanent existence. So surpassing that is only possible if you have realization of the personhood of Krishna, like the Supreme Person beyond the world. So Prabhupada focuses on the purport on this point. He says, They're by advancement of knowledge, human civilization has created many things, including spaceships, atomic energy. Yet it has failed to create a situation in which people need not die, take birth again, become old, or suffer from disease. Whenever an intelligent person raises the question of these miseries before so-called scientists, the scientist very cleverly replies that material science is progressing and that ultimately it will be possible to render man deathless, ageless, and diseaseless. Such answers prove the scientists' gross ignorance of material nature. So categorically, everything has a beginning and end in the material world. What to speak of our own context, even for demigods who live, I mean, many orders of magnitude longer than we do and have access to much more than we do. They also have a beginning and an end to their material existence. What to speak of us? Just like from our point of view, there are these insects. Like I remember going to Vrindavan, and there is one time in the month of Kartik where there is this like little insects that they live for one night. You seen these insects? Things like this. You meet them in the evening, the night before. They're just being born, and they have themselves a full night, find themselves a nice partner, have some kids, and die. And the next morning, they're all on the ground. That's it. That's the whole thing. And it's like, that's it. Well, I mean, from the demigod's point of view, our life is just like that. But from the spiritual point of view, all material life is just like that. It's insignificant focusing on that which is gone like that, right? So this verse is saying we need to focus on the supreme, because otherwise, whether you're a firefly or a human or a demigod-bodied jiva, you're just getting caught up in your particular little whirlwind. Maybe it's a tiny whirlwind, maybe it's a bigger one or a whirlpool, and that's it. It just comes and goes. So in the Srimad Bhagavatam, there's a nice verse that talks about this. This is from the Srimad Bhagavatam 11:19-17. 11:19-17. Shruti pratyakshan aitihyam anumanam chatushtayam. Pramāneshu anavasthanad vikalpatsa virajyate. The verse says, there are 4 kinds of evidence. The Vedic knowledge, so scripture, our own direct experience, traditional wisdom, and logic. Traditional wisdom means like songs, poems, stories your grandparents told you, fairy tales, folk tales, fables, myths, all these things. They help you understand the temporary, insubstantial situation of the world. And by that, you're supposed to become detached from that duality, right? So all the winning and losing, the being born, the dying, all the ups and downs, the material categories, you're supposed to learn from your own recognition of the world. Yeah, it is coming and going. From stories, all the fables and fairy tales are telling us this. All our grandmother's stories and myths and legends are telling us this. Little Red Riding Hood, Star Wars, name it, you name it. All these stories are saying them. Goldilocks, traditional wisdom, logic, our own logic should understand this. Aside from seeing the world and observing it, we should see like, well, has there ever been an example of somebody who has not died? None. I don't like my odds, right? And Shastra. Shastra is the ultimate authority. But even without Shastra, we have those 3. And they should help us to detach ourselves from that material, coming and going. So this is the point. The point is that if you don't have knowledge of higher reality, you only have that coming and going, which we have to admit is temporary, right? Very temporary. Prabhupada continues, on the material planets, everyone from Brahma down to the ant is trying to lord it over material nature, and this is the material disease. As long as this material disease continues, the living entity has to undergo the process of bodily change. So it's a rather sobering and rather urgent call. Prabhupada finishes the purport by saying, we must therefore save ourselves and our fellow man in the right way. There's no question of liking or disliking the truth. It is there. If we want to be saved from repeated birth and death, we must take to the devotional service of the Lord. There can be no compromise, for this is a matter of necessity. There's no other way, actually. You can't speculate your way out of that. You have to have a transcendental connection, a connection to that which transcends matter. And bhakti is the most efficacious way of doing that, the most natural. And as the next verses are going to point out, the most joyful. So that's it for verse 14. We'll go to verse 15. Let's take any comments, questions, or reflections on verse 14, anything that was said so far. How that landed for you, any realizations or reflections.
Yes, I have a reflection.
Mhm.
Just thinking about life before bhakti and before learning about any of this, I guess, you get so caught up in the day to day and you don't really have appreciation.
Mm.
And it's so easy to get caught up in that. So I feel grateful for the Shastra and thankful for the knowledge, because without it, you really don't feel anything.
Mm,
So I can relate to that.
yeah. Without it, you don't really feel anything. Because I mean, in the long view,
Yeah.
all that felt great, I won. I have, I got what I wanted, or that felt bad, I didn't get what I want, I lost it. They don't really amount to much.
Yeah.
And they even out. And they're karmically derived anyway. And anytime anyone is in the history of the universe had any of that, it's never satisfied anyhow.
Mm.
So yeah, I'm hearing that you're grateful for spiritual experience and spiritual knowledge. Yeah. Because it can having those two things side by side, you actually can transcend the birth and death. Otherwise, there's no motivation to go beyond, and there's also no transcendental experience to kind of like guide what could be beyond, right?
Mm.
It's just this kind of like, well, I guess I have the choice between buying into the material illusion or rejecting it, but living in misery, still surrounded by it. Those are your two choices. Not good enough. Thank you. And yet, yeah.
The reflection is around, because this purport and this verse is speaking about death as well, and
Mhm. Very much so.
in my experience, my service with end of life work and supporting people through grief and such, those that don't have any spiritual, they don't bring the spiritual side by side with the material, or don't have any spiritual beliefs, they believe it goes black, it goes dark after
Which
you
is
die,
also a belief.
which is a belief.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess is that nihilism, I guess, I don't.
Yeah.
I
I would
guess.
classify as nihilism.
How much more they suffer from the loss of a loved one, and it's like Prabhupada says here, you must save your fellow man in the right sense, right? And so it's first we have to understand truth and absolute truth and be in have our own relationship with it, and then this responsibility to share that, to not ever push that, right, but to share that and share bhakti and share another perspective, share doubting your doubts, sharing why not, these types of things, and sharing our own experiences so that we can perhaps, or just like a sliver that could, support someone who doesn't, who doesn't have a faith or who hasn't found truth or hasn't been open to truth so far.
Yeah.
But having, dovetailing everything to Krishna just really can eliminate or reduce a lot of fear around death in a huge way. So
Definitely. Yeah, it's a great service to provide, and helping people to process loss and grief and death, which is part of life. It's an inevitable part of life. Always was, always will be. And it's because that's always there, it's necessary. That's part of why Prabhupada is so urgent. He's speaking so urgently. We have to do this because the time is ticking. Otherwise, if we invest ourselves, and 99.9% of people will choose this path. They won't choose the path of, yeah, I see it's all illusion, but I'll just sit in it and like suffer. No, they'll just believe that it isn't delusion and that actually matters. All the different winning and losing actually matters. It amounts to something. And then when it's taken away, it hurts so much because they didn't spend any of that precious time actually getting their own experience of something beyond. And by then, it's too late for it to soften the blow. It's going to hurt a lot. It may be a teachable moment, like it was for Arjuna in his temporary bewilderment. It became a teachable moment for him to surrender to Krishna. And, okay, I really need to figure this out. I really need your help now. And then it hurts, but it propels them to level up spiritually, or it may not, and they just keep getting pounded. But the upshot is that we have to ourselves get a spiritual experience. And having had that, we have to keep getting it and share it with others, give them the opportunity to do so. And also just kind of like distill our own experience into words, into feeling, and transmit it to them so they can experience the truth of what we've experienced. That's what the hearing process is. Transcendental sound means the transmission of spiritual experience, right? Like if you're hearing the Brahma Samhita, that's Lord Brahma's experience of Govinda. He's had darshan of Krishna, and he's speaking these prayers. We receive that, we get his darshan secondhand. We read Bhagavad Gita, that's Arjuna's experience, or Sanjay's experience of Arjuna's experience. And we're getting it through Vyasadeva, through Prabhupada. We're getting all their experience too. So this is, that's another sutra for you. Transcendental sound is a transmission of spiritual experience. So we need to have that sound in our life. And we can also transmit that sound to others by speaking truthfully about our own spiritual experience, which we have to cultivate. And it's necessary. It's necessary. Thank you. Verse 15. If there were any more questions or reflections, you can add them at the end of this verse. We're going to pause again here and then again at the end. So verse 15, having established the necessity of knowing the Lord, the speaker of Sri Isopanisad shares this verse, which is actually in the first person. It's a prayer. Hiranmayena patrena satyasyapi hitam mukham tattvam bhushanana pavranu satyadharmaya drishtaye. It's no longer just like speaking the abstract. It's saying, "Oh my Lord, sustainer of all that lives, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee." And this is the result of recognizing the need to have transcendental experience. You call out like this. Because I need to have transcendental experience, and because I can't make it happen myself, we pray for it, we ask for it. This is a prayer. This is a powerful prayer. You can take this into your own practice. Either memorize the verse and study it, or share it again and pray, recite it, or just take the essence of it. It's praying to the Lord for him to reveal his face, right? So Prabhupada in the purport, he mentions that Bhagavad Gita 10:42, the last verse in the 10th chapter, is where Krishna says, with a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support the entire universe, right? That whole chapter, chapter 10 Bhagavad Gita, is Krishna saying, here's some ways you can see me in the universe, in the world, with your own eyes, with your ears, with your material senses. I am flower-bearing spring. I am the Himalayan mountains. I am the ocean. I am the sun. I'm the wind. I'm the shark. I am, all these incredible experiences. The Om sound, yes. Then he says, but what need is there, Arjuna, for all this detailed knowledge? Because with a single fragment of myself, I pervade and support this entire universe. This also came up in our Friday morning Bhagavatam classes. Krishna is himself. Just a fragment of himself is enough for the universe. That's what it's populated by. All the material energy is just a fragment of his external energy. All the jivas are just little tiny plenary portions of him. And so when we understand that, then we want to cut out the middleman. We want to go to the real thing. Why limit ourselves? Why try to satisfy ourselves with his external energy? We want to see his dazzling face. This is the logic, is that if Krishna himself is all attractive, such that anything that exists in the universe, if it has any attractiveness at all, is only attractive, even temporarily, because it comes from him, how attractive must he be? If anything is beautiful, if anything is intelligent, if anything has, power, it's because of him. So how powerful must he be? How intelligent? How wonderful, right? What kind of opulence is there in the Supreme? If we can find this opulence in this world, even temporarily, that's the logic. And so therefore the prayer is, I can't see your face. It's covered by your dazzling effulgence. Let me see it. Now, this effulgence is described in detail in the purport. There's a great deal of Shastra, including Bhagavad Gita 1427, where Prabhupada begins the purport, and several verses of the Brahma Samhita, which talk about this effulgence. So the Sanskrit is known as Brahma Jyoti. The Brahma Jyoti, literally, like, you can translate that as spiritual effulgence. Sometimes you hear about like the great light, as a spiritual experience. That's Brahma Jyoti, also known as Brahman. This Brahma Jyoti, this transcendental light, is actually affirmed in scripture as a real spiritual experience. This is actually the emanation from Krishna's transcendental body. It's the beginning of spiritual realization. And there are several Upanishadic mantras that Prabhupada quotes to talk about this Brahman effulgence. He quotes 3 verses in a row from the Mundaka Upanishad, and also from the Bhagavad Gita and the Brahma Samhita, wherein it's described that, whereas some people may think that this great light is the totality of spiritual experience, it's actually just the very beginning. There's a nice verse in the Brahma Samhita. Maybe Prabhupada quotes it in the next verse of the Isopanisad. No, he quotes a different verse in the Brahma Samhita, but I can quote it for you. Yasya prabha prabhavato jagat andakoti koti svashesu vasitadi vibhuti pinnam tad brahma nishkalam anantam ashesha bhutam govindam adi purusham tamaham bhajami. Oh, here it is. It's in our purport here. It's in the purport of 15 after all. Yeah. Translation: in the millions and millions of universes, there are innumerable planets, and each and every one of them is different, and each and every one of them is different from the others by its cosmic constitution. All these planets are situated in a corner of the Brahma Jyoti, the spiritual effulgence. This Brahma Jyoti is but the personal rays of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Govinda, whom I worship. That's a verse spoken by Brahma in his prayers, Brahma Samhita. Another verse from that Brahma Samhita says that the long practice of impersonal yoga, by which yogis who don't accept the personal form of the divine or are not aware of it, practice controlling their breath and do inward meditation, gives them access to the tips of the toes of the lotus feet of Krishna. They can experience the effulgence of Krishna. But that realization is just an insignificant aspect of the joy of seeing Krishna face to face, right? So this is the greatest context, that this dazzling effulgence is manifested in this world as the veil of matter, and in spiritual life, it's manifested as the transcendental light. But beyond that is a transcendental person. This is the greatest mystery, that beyond even the transcendental Brahma Jyoti, which is without beginning and end, it's not material, it's actually spiritual. It's actually divine. There's actually a divine person behind that. So this prayer is coming on the heels of recognizing that I cannot truly transcend birth and death without the Supreme Person. I need real knowledge of him, side by side with whatever other knowledge I've gathered in this life. And so this is a prayer for very intimate knowledge, very intimate experience. Let me see your face, right? The face is the most personal part. The face. It's actually, the word is here in the Sanskrit. Satyasyapitam mukham. Mukham means face. Sometimes impersonalist interpretations of Upanishads say there cannot be a person. Verses such as this indicate there has to be a person, right? There are verses that indicate the impersonal feature, the Brahma Jyoti, the great light. That's there also. There are verses about that. However, if we only take those verses, we're not really being fair. How do we explain this verse, in which the Upanishad is praying fervently, we might add, for the removal of the effulgence to see the real face? This is the real message. Prabhupada spends his purport talking about how Krishna manifests so much sweetness in his pastimes. The personality of Godhead Sri Krishna is always filled with transcendental bliss. When he was present in Vrindavan in India 5,000 years ago, he always remained in transcendental bliss, even from the beginning of his childhood pastimes. The killings of various demons such as Agha, Bakha, Putana, and Pralamba were but pleasure excursions for him. In his village of Vrindavan, he enjoyed himself with his mother, brother, and friends. And when he played the role of a naughty butter thief, all his associates enjoyed celestial bliss by his stealing.
Mm.
Everything the Lord did in Vrindavan was for the pleasure of his associates there. The Lord created these pastimes to attract the dry speculators and the acrobats of the so-called Hatha Yoga system who wish to find the absolute truth. The acrobats, those who focus on the external only. Those who have experience with the yoga world of today can talk about this. Yoga today is the yoga of Kali Yuga, has to do with the externals, because it's a very externally oriented age we live in. And it's very easy to appreciate, very natural and simple to appreciate the externals of yoga because they offer a great deal externally. Actually, yoga is a tremendously powerful tool for fitness. And if you look a little deeper, it's also a tool for mental health. And if you look a little bit deeper, it's actually a tool for longevity. And if you look a little bit deeper, it's actually a tool for transcendental realization. And if you look deepest, you actually recognize, as the Shastra indicates, that it's actually the ultimate means for connecting to the Supreme Person. So, Prabhupada here is pointing out that Krishna, his most personal feature is actually a great gift. And for those who are sincerely looking for a higher experience, this revelation of his face, this bhakti experience, is that. So once again, as we've seen in many places, sincerity is key, right? This verse is saying that the speaker of the verse doesn't have pure knowledge. They just know that they need Krishna. They need the divine, and they can't see them. And they're praying, please remove that which is obstructing me. All manner of material and spiritual distraction. Let me see your real person, right? That's sincerity. It's like the job of material nature is to provide all these distractions. Yeah, bhakti is cool and all, but how about food? How about sex? How about money? How about prestige? How about you practice bhakti, but while you're doing it, you actually get so much praise for it. And you actually just get to like practice bhakti, but you're really getting all the praise you secretly wanted for so many lifetimes. You get to be a hero and a leader, a spiritual leader even. How about that? Or how about here's Brahman realization? You can actually experience the joy of Brahman, the joy of merging into the unlimited great light, which makes all material enjoyment and suffering look completely insignificant. How about that? How's that for a distraction? How about the idea that you're actually the supreme? You can actually be Brahman. How about that? The ultimate trap. All these different distractions. But for one who's like, no, I want to receive the greatest thing, you know? For them, they pray like this. And Krishna, as Prabhupada says, the Lord created these pastimes to attract the dry speculators and the acrobats of the so-called Hatha Yoga system who wish to find the absolute truth. Those who wish to find the absolute truth can be attracted by it. If you want to find the absolute truth, you can have access to it. Doesn't matter if you're illiterate, doesn't matter at all, any of your qualifications or disqualifications, if you want to find the absolute truth. It's a nice pastime. We may have shared this in another class. There was a practitioner of worship of Lord Shiva in Vrindavan, and they satisfied Lord Shiva, and by that worship of Lord Shiva, he appeared to his devotee, and the devotee said, I would like the greatest thing. And Lord Shiva said, okay, go to Sanatan Goswami. There is this sadhu, this great saintly person in Vrindavan called Sanatan. Go to him and ask him, tell him I sent you, tell him to ask for the greatest thing. He can give it to you. I want what can give the greatest wealth, right? And so they went to Sanatan Goswami, and they said, you know, I've come to you because I've asked for the greatest thing, and I've been told that you have it. You have this Chintamani gem that can give all the greatest wealth. So please, I would like that. And so Sanatan Goswami said, I don't think I have that. No, Lord Shiva says you must have that. So okay, so he looked for it, and he found it in his refuse pile along with the garbage. He said, here it is, you can have it. And so this man was very happy, and he took it and he left. And then he thought, well, wait a minute. Lord Shiva said this person is the most accomplished spiritual practitioner. He had what I was looking for. Why would he keep it in the garbage? And he went back to Sanatana Goswami and he said, actually, I don't think this is it. Because you were keeping it in such an insignificant place. You must have something greater yourself. I don't think you gave me the greatest thing. I know what this can do. This can turn anything to gold. This can fulfill all my material desires. I think you have something better. And Sanatana Goswami said, yes, I'll give it to you. First, you have to throw that away. Are you prepared to do that? He threw it away after deliberation, and he surrendered to Sanatana Goswami and became a devotee and received the gift of bhakti. So for one who is willing to at least temporarily suspend their own ideas of what could be the greatest thing, they can begin to receive Krishna's ideas, his pure devotees' ideas of what's the greatest thing, and receive that experience which backs up those ideas. So now we'll take any comments, questions, and reflections on that. This removal of the dazzling effulgence, the darshan, the vision of Krishna's face, that gift of bhakti, in the most personal form of yoga.
It sounds like Eileen was on the right track in her meditation this week.
Mm-hmm.
Try to see Krishna's face in front of her. And I appreciate how the dazzling effulgence, because when I read that, I'm like, okay, this is like Krishna's dad, because he's so beautiful and it's his light and his effulgence, but that shows up for us in this world as Maya.
Yeah.
It's like all the sparkly things around us, like
dazzling.
Dazzling.
Here's the definition of dazzling: extremely bright, especially so as to blind the eyes temporarily. Something that can actually blind you, but also temporarily, because you can see past that dazzle eventually, the glitter.
We were at our kirtan this weekend, we talked a little bit about like, we were kind of cracking up, we were like, don't diss Maya. Because Maya is really important. Like Maya is there to like say, let me give you the shiny, let me give you the distraction, let me give you the blindness, like let you think that you are the only planet out there, you're not one of millions of planets and gazillions of people, like, and if you can get through that, by Krishna's mercy, then like you get to possibly see Krishna's face. So I think it's an interesting commentary, because a lot of people are like, Maya's awful and Maya's horrible and we have to go in this Kali Yuga and it's terrible, but actually Maya's really cool because it's really challenging us. And once we can, like, I just had that idea that this is all illusion, this is all distraction, then we really can surrender ourselves. So it's so don't diss Maya was like our takeaway from the weekend, that it's like actually really important so that we can see the temporariness of everything and we can see how insignificant we are compared to what all of Krishna's creation looks like.
Yeah. And that's part of why I would say that's part of why the previous verses talk about experiencing the spiritual and material side by side. Because if somebody says, I choose Krishna, but they don't know what they're choosing him over, how long will it take for them to be captured again by Maya, be dazzled, be temporarily blinded by something extremely bright? I mean, Maya is more powerful than we are, more powerful than our own ideas of Krishna. We actually have to attract him to reveal himself to us, because he is the master of Maya. If he reveals himself, then side by side, Krishna and Maya, there's no problem. We choose Krishna. But if we're thinking like, I'm definitely choosing Krishna, but we don't actually like deliberately let go of the distractions that Maya offers us. We don't receive those challenges, then our own bhakti, our own sincerity is not purified, it's not sharpened, it doesn't come to a full place. And Prabhupada, one time, one of his disciples, I'm trying to remember the exact way he put it, one of his disciples said, Srila Prabhupada, this process is so hard, Maya is so strong. And Prabhupada said, it is not that Maya is so strong, it is that I think he said either determination or resolution is so weak, right? There's a relationship between how strong Maya is and our own conviction and determination. She's there to sharpen that, right? This prayer that we just heard, Isopanisad verse 15, is a prayer of somebody who's not wasting any time. Your face is covered, your real face is covered by your dazzling effulgence. Kindly remove that covering and exhibit yourself to your pure devotee. This is raw need, right? So there's no amount of Maya that can tempt somebody away from that real prayer. That real prayer is born from recognizing that nothing else is going to satisfy except this, right? So Maya is instrumental to that. Yeah. Thank you. Good
And
realization.
Maya's a devotee,
She
right,
is.
Maya
She has a
is the
thankless
goddess.
task.
Right, and it's her service, and don't diss devotees, like one, a killer of spiritual life advancement is criticizing other devotees,
Yeah.
right? So to think about it in that way is kind of an interesting contemplation.
Yeah, it's part of a long tradition of blaming the object of your desire.
Mhm.
Like it's classic, you know. Oh, women are too attractive, so women are evil. Money is evil. Money's not evil. The love of money is the root of all evil. That's the quote. Money is not evil. The love of money is the root of all evil.
Mhm.
The thing is not the problem. Women, money, beauty. The world is not the problem. The problem is the problem I'm carrying is the problem. That's the problem, the real problem, the disease, the like raging need to make myself the middle of everything, the center of everything. That's a real problem. That's a hole that can't be filled, right? So that's the kind of demonization of Maya is just another extension of that. It's like actually avoiding responsibility for our own dysfunctional relationship with Krishna's energy. It's like, it's not her fault that I have a dysfunctional relationship with her. I call this into my life because I keep trying to have a dysfunctional relationship where I think I'm Krishna. That's the real problem, not her fault, not Maya's fault. It's not all these different temptations that come to me. They're just coming because I keep asking for them. I'm not asking for this. What this verse is asking for. That's the real problem. The universe is just going to keep poking your buttons. As long as you still have these buttons, it's going to keep poking them. You can't even solve the fact that it's poking the buttons. You can't say like, okay, I'll just not have the buttons anymore. No, you will have them. You need to ask for Krishna. That's what you have to do. And then things start to change because that same external energy is just a reflection of Krishna's internal energy. As soon as your purpose is shifted, then your relationship with the energy shifts and her effect on you changes. That same energy that was holding you down, disturbing you, dazzling you, becomes the same energy by which you realize Krishna, become nourished by him, become engaged in bhakti, become connected to his devotees. It's the same energy, just shows her real face. So we're calling for the supreme masculine. The supreme feminine is also manifest to us in the bhakti process. The external Maya is holding us down, but the internal Maya is what's carrying us up. That Radharani, that bhakti shakti, that devotional influence, that feminine energy is happening too. That's also part of our bhakti experience. So don't diss Radharani. Don't diss her Maya shadow, because it's got a purpose. She knows what she's doing. Any more reflections before we move to verse 16? How's our online crew doing? You're stunned.
Who's the fire icon picture, or who's the sunset?
It's Tracy.
Oh, it's Tracy.
Any other reflections or comments before we move to verse 16?
I think that prayer, like, please remove what is obstructing me from reaching you, like, that's one of the things that I totally unawareingly said in India. And it's been a wild 6 months since being home. Like, it's intense. You don't really recognize what's actually obstructing you. You don't actually understand fully what's the veil. Like, you don't fully understand it until like you can start to move through the clearing of that.
Yeah.
And you had said when you can surrender your own ideas of what is great and allow room to receive Krishna's ideas is kind of where I'm like what I'm coming into in my understanding right now. And some of like my friends who I've talked about this with have heard me talk about this. It's just what I have expected and hoped for my life. My challenges, my veil is I never believed that was true, that could be something achievable. And so what happens is that, what I'm learning is that some of those deep-seated ideas and hopes and dreams are Krishna's ideas, hopes and dreams for you. And that in my circumstances, that the veil is that I never had the belief that I was actually able, worthy, deserving of such a life. And
Right.
to see it coming into fruition, it's like extremely moving and causes me to cry a lot. But to understand that like his idea is what he wants for you, when you are sincere and you give your devotion in that way, it's like far greater than what you ever can understand for yourself.
Yeah. It's a rather humbling thing to admit that we don't actually know how to be happy on our own. Not truly happy, you know? We don't actually have that capacity to like figure out, you know, what's really best for me. That sounds like throwing in the towel. But that's what Arjuna did. He's like, I can't figure this out. I give up. So for the devotee, there's like a version of that. There's like a some degree of like, yeah, actually, Krishna knows better than me. And yeah, you're reflecting that in your own life, you've seen that your own ideas were shaped by your own beliefs, you know, imperfect senses and, you know, cheating propensity, all these things. They just limit what you could achieve because they limit what you thought you deserved or what you thought was possible. So the Shastra is demonstrating that there are things that go so much beyond what we could consider possible. Just completely different dimensions of reality.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's a way in which we have to just like, as this speaker is of this verse is saying, I don't know. Like he doesn't know. They don't know what Krishna's face looks like. They're asking for it to be revealed. There's just this thing of like, you don't yeah, you don't realize how much covering is there until you pass through it, you know?
Yep.
And you can't actually see that till it's starting to get removed. You're like, wow. So it's only because of asking for this that okay, Krishna says so they want it. This person wants it. So then he sends whatever is necessary. He's actually doing the heavy lifting. I've said this many times. We don't do the heavy lifting in Bhakti. Krishna does the heavy lifting. We're about this big. But we have to try. And trying, you know, a lot of trying is making prayers like this and meaning it. So material life, a lot of it is just coming to the point of being able to make this prayer.
I have a question,
Mhm.
not necessarily for me, but also just in general. Like for someone who is hearing this right now, or is listening to this later, or one day maybe is so fortunate to get to listen to this, whatever it may be, and they maybe want to have the sincerity to make that prayer, to actually like want to have that happen in their life, but they're not there. You know, like it isn't actually sincere. They'll say it because it's like, oh, I'm being told that this is helpful for me to make this prayer, right? Or teachers before me or student devotees before me did this. Like, what would you advise to someone at that
Yeah.
point?
So
Yeah.
this prayer is like remove all the obstructions and all the distractions and show me your real self. But if we don't really want that yet, then what do we do? Okay.
You
So
get to a point where you do want that.
you can do a couple things. You can see where you actually are. Like maybe if you introspect, you're like, well, I don't. Yeah, if Krishna walked in the room right now, I wouldn't really be able to give him the respect and attention he kind of deserves. So maybe I'm not really ready to make that prayer in all sincerity. But what's missing? What's the gap between where I am and where this speaker of this verse is? Maybe I need to be convinced about how great it would be to see his face. So you can make that prayer. Please convince me, Krishna. Please put me in touch with what I need to have to become convinced that this is what I should actually be asking for. Because right now I'm asking for some other things. You know what they are. I know what they are. Let's not go there right now. But you know, let me be convinced. Let me want. That's kind of a brave prayer. Like, you know, let me want to want this. I don't want it, but I want to want it. You know, you can always start somewhere. It's just a question of like, where are you at? Is it a lack of conviction? Is it a lack of association? Is it a lack of support? Is it a lack of belief in yourself? Is it a lack of steadiness that's getting in the way? Often we don't know. If we have guidance and support, they could be like, well, actually, you're doing great, but you're chanting like 200 rounds one day and like 0 for the next week, there's no steadiness in your practice. Just chant 4 rounds a day. You'll do a lot better. You'll actually have some consistent experience. We can't tell on our own. So sometimes we don't even know what to ask for. But if that's where you're at, then instead of saying, I want the greatest thing, I actually just want like to see your beautiful smiling lotus face. Then we can say, I don't know what to ask for, Krishna. I don't know what's missing, but I know there's something greater than what I have now. Please help me. And then you're asking for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. And that's sincere. That's sincere. We don't have to have complete knowledge. It certainly helps. That's why we're reading these books. That's why we're in each other's sangha. That's why we follow the pure devotees. But that sincerity forges a path to the kind of association and the shastra and mantras that will really give us the greatest thing. And if you're really really far from that, then the good news is you're still on the path. Everyone follows my path in all respects, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita. Because what's happening is you're trying to satisfy your material desires with absolutely no impediment. You're like, no, I want that. I totally want it. I want the new car. It's like, great. So you get to be part of the whole material tabernacle. Like you'll get it, or you won't get it, or you get it, then you lose it. You'll go through the whole thing. And that ripens you on the vine. Maybe you're like a fruit that's not ripe, ready to be plucked yet. You need to sit in there in the sun and just be like ripened more by the whole process of material energy. You have to realize, oh, this is totally not a game I want to play anymore.
Get more material exhausted.
Yeah. Fulfill all your desires and then lose and realize like, this is stacked. This is not a game I want to play. I'm cashing my chips. I'm done. I'm leaving the casino. This is dumb. Instead of compulsively gambling, you have to come to the point where like, oh, that's it, rock bottom. I'm done with this nonsense. That's also part of the journey. But if somebody is like an association of devotees and they're practicing devotee, but they can't make the 100% pure prayer, then pray for whatever you're ready to pray for right now. And Krishna will provide that. Right. Verse 16, and we'll wrap it up. Bhushanlikarshiyam Surya Prajapatya Vyuharashmin Samuha Hijo Yate Rupam Kalyanatamang Pate Pasham Yosavasau Purusha Sohamasmi. O my Lord, O primeval philosopher, maintainer of the universe, O regulating principle, destination of the pure devotees, well-wisher of the progenitors of mankind, please remove the effulgence of your transcendental rays so that I can see your form of bliss. You are the eternal supreme personality of Godhead, like unto the sun, as am I. So this is really following from the last verse. Want to see Krishna's face. This is another prayer. Remove that dazzling effulgence so I can see your form of bliss. So there's this point of bliss, ananda, right? In the Brahman effulgence, there's eternality, there's sat, but there's no ananda. There's no ananda until we have personal relationship, because it takes two. You can't actually have true bliss with only one. You have to have connection. Connection is the highest function, highest form of joy. The joy of connection. So this form of bliss, Krishna's form, his beautiful face, this is what allows there to be ananda, because there's you and there's Krishna. You don't become Krishna and you're not unaware of him. You're there experiencing. There's already two. That two means there's a relationship. There's the supremely attractive beloved Lord, and there's his very his beloved devotee, and they're relating, they're connecting. This is a prayer for bhakti, right? And also the verse is saying, you are the eternal supreme personality of Godhead, like unto the sun, as am I, right? So Prabhupada in the purport talks about how you have the sun, and you have the sun rays, and the sun rays of sunshine, and the sun itself are, in a sense, not different, right? If it weren't raining, we could say the sun is in the room. But if the sun itself was in the room, it would be different. So there's a relationship. The sunshine is not different, but it's also just an extension of, it's just a fragmental portion of the sun. So this verse is giving us that philosophy that you are actually like one spiritual reality. I'm of the same spiritual reality as you, right? In other words, I belong with you. We are one. I belong to Krishna. I am one with Krishna. This is a prayer calling for devotional oneness, right? I want to know you. George Harrison, I really want to know you. Really want to see you, Lord, but it takes so long, my sweet Lord. This is the same idea. I want to know you. I want to experience you because I have the same nature as you do. I don't have the same nature as matter. I don't have the same nature as money, my material body, all the different other currencies of this world. I don't connect with that eternally. I don't belong to that. I'm not one with that. I'm only one with you. Therefore, I need you. That's why I need you, because I see who I am to some degree. I see you have the same nature. I need to be with you, right? This is like going home. That's why Prabhupada says back home, back to God. That's where we belong with Krishna. We're one with Krishna. So there's a prayer calling for devotional oneness. And it's using this example of the sun. You are like the sun, as am I. You are luminous, you are effulgent, you are a source of heat and light, as am I. You have the same spiritual reality, but you're the supreme spiritual reality. I am your part and parcel. Like I'm a part of sunshine of the complete sun. So it's an extension of the previous prayer. And it's another expression of dependence, right? As Krishna is like the sun, we're like the sunshine, we're dependent. Sunshine comes from the sun. It has a relationship of causality, has a relationship of dependence, has a relationship of it's a big size difference. It doesn't create other rays. It's itself just a ray. The source of those rays is the sun. So similarly, we're not the source of other jivas. We're not creating other living entities. Krishna only is doing that. We're all manifesting from him. So we have this relationship of dependence. This devotee is praying like this. Please remove your effulgence because I'm dependent on you. I am coming from you. I am an emanation of you. I am of that same spiritual reality. You're the great sun. I'm your sunshine. I belong with you. I want to be one with you, right? This is surrender. This is dependence. And it's fundamental to this mood, to this prayer. So from the purport, the Lord fully maintains his unalloyed devotees, and he guides them progressively on the path toward devotional perfection. As the leader of his devotees, he ultimately awards the desired results of devotional service by giving himself to them. Being the creator, he can bestow all necessary qualifications upon his devotees so that they can ultimately reach him, right? If we have something lacking in our practice, Krishna preserves what we have and carries what we lack. 9th chapter Bhagavad Gita says, if there's something we're lacking, he carries it. He has it. Whatever we have, he carries. Whatever we don't have, he has. Whatever we need, he also has. So he can bestow all necessary qualifications upon his devotees so that they can ultimately reach him. And this devotee is saying, I want to see you. I belong with you. I want to be one with you. And I need your help to do that. Can't do it on my own. I'm dependent on you. He is the origin of all living entities and all that exists. One who knows this engages himself at once in the devotional service of the Lord. Such a pure and fully cognizant devotee of the Lord is fully attached to him in heart and soul. And whenever such a devotee assembles with similar devotees, they have no engagement but the glorification of the Lord's transcendental activities. Right? They're always praying like this. They're always recalling and recollecting and remembering, reconnecting and hearing. That's the business of pure devotees. Because they're convinced that, yes, I want to be one with Krishna. I belong to him. So they're always hearing and chanting. Lord always helps the pure devotees by imparting necessary knowledge within their hearts, and thus, out of his special favor, he dissipates all the darkness of ignorance. That's a paraphrase of Bhagavad Gita, chapter 10, verse 11, where Krishna promises that. He promises that he removes the darkness of ignorance, like a shining lamp of knowledge, he says. The speculative philosophers and yogis cannot imagine this because they more or less depend on their own strength. But the Katha Upanishad 1:223 says the Lord can be known only by those whom he favors and not by anyone else. again, this mood of dependence. We're not trying to come to him independently. We're saying, I need you. Please help me to be one with you. Help me to know what you want from me. Help me to be connected with you. That's a devotional prayer, not a like, empiric philosopher or like impersonal yogic prayer. It's a devotional prayer. Okay. Om Tat Sat. Hare Krishna. Now we'll take any final questions or reflections. Anything that stood out before we go over the homework for the week. Anything from our online crew?
I'll go.
Yes.
Krishna. Um, reflecting back on verse 15 and 16, and just what Melanie had mentioned, and just thinking about this, asking for Krishna and things will begin to change. Just again, that surrender piece and how we want to control everything. It seems like, in the material world, and it's so fruitless that but we can really find relief in just hearing the pastimes, hearing the leelas, and Krishna responds to that, and he will help us. That's just such a nice thing to know. And that he's doing the heavy lifting if we just surrender.
Right.
Not so easy because I don't know why it's not. It gets easier as the more that your knowledge, I think, is the more you learn and the more you surrender and the more faith you have. But it takes work to always cultivate. I heard you say that word a couple times, or maybe one time, and I thought that is true. Like, we have to cultivate our spiritual knowledge all the time, our spiritual practice.
Anything worthwhile takes work.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah, those things you mentioned, conviction, faith, knowledge, they are benefits that we get from practicing bhakti with sincerity. It's not that faith is just like a thing you just choose to believe, right? It's not such a shallow thing. The ultimate sense, the word faith, when we're talking about the Sanskrit word that Prabhupada translates as faith, it's shraddha, where we put our heart. How do we decide where we put our heart in our lives, right? Is it just like I choose to believe this, so I put my heart there? That's very shallow. That's like lip deep. What is heart deep? Where do we choose to put our hearts? What are we really convinced is really important? So the bhakti process itself moves our heart. It actually shifts our heart. That faith grows. So really, when we say surrender, we have to surrender. What that really means is not just like sign of the dotted line, I surrender, I give up. Okay, that's not a bad idea, but it means taking the bhakti process and trying to apply it in my life with sincerity as much as I can right now, right? And trying to just do that much sincerely with my full heart. And then waiting for the results to come from it, asking for results to come from it, asking for Krishna to show his face in my life in the form of more knowledge, more faith, more conviction, more association, more capacity to hear and chant, however he chooses to manifest, more nourishment through my practice of more peaceful mind, clarity, so I can understand what's in my best interest, because I can't even tell right now. I'm so confused. So surrender is like an ongoing thing, but really it just boils down to doing what we can do right now of the bhakti practices, of the bhakti lifestyle, under guidance, in a practical way, with full sincerity. That's what surrender comes down to. Yeah. Just kind of like break that word down. That's what gives all those things. That's what gives faith and realization. Jai, thank you.
Thank you, Shami Pras.
More comments, reflections, questions?
I love how these last two verses are prayers.
They're prayers, yeah. There's a shift in tone
Yeah.
from the philosophical and abstract to the personal. and urgent.
It's like talking about how the impersonal isn't gonna give us what we actually want, and
Yeah.
then it shifts to personal prayers
Yes.
in order to call.
Yeah, there's no sense of urgency before this. It's just like, these are some things that are true. But now it's like, I need you, Krishna. I need to see your face. There's like a time, like a time limit on that. I want it now.
Yeah.
I need this. You know, there's a person involved. Whereas before it was important, but you could be like, oh, this is cool, this is interesting, kind of make it like armchair candy, not do anything about it. But these verses are very they're philosophy in practice. The speaker has applied the philosophy, they're convinced, and now the result is they're praying like this, which is an indication for us of what the result of practicing bhakti should be for us, calling out as well.
Right, we have it backwards in so many ways, but like there's such a sense of, for many, a sense of urgency in the material world, and I find myself getting
I've
caught.
got to
in,
get
like,
there. I've got to
get this
got to make
done.
it. Got to succeed.
Yeah, and then, but there's not a sense of urgency.
Yeah, no, that
in
I could do
spiritual
later.
life.
I'll do that later whenever I have some free time.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, if
Should
I'm
be
bored one day,
opposite.
maybe when I'm old, I'll surrender. I'll start practicing bhakti. It's like, no.
Mm-hmm.
All those first few verses are building the case for why we have to be urgent now about our bhakti, side by side with our material stuff. And then the last two verses are just like the expression of that. It's like, I need to see your face, because verses 1 through 13 convinced me.
Mhm.
Yeah, good point. Prabhupada was asked one time, how did it go? So somebody said, Swamiji, you know, isn't it the case that spiritual life is like something you should do when you're older? Like all these people you're encouraging to set aside their youth, and shouldn't they just be doing this when they're older? This bhakti thing, this devotional, spiritual God, all that. And Prabhupada said, old means you know you're about to die. So can you tell me you're going to live longer than I am? Prabhupada is like 75, 80 years old. Who can say when they're going to die, right? When is the necessity, therefore, of taking bhakti? The answer is the necessity is now, because we could die at any time, right? And then all your material, everything you've tried for materially is wiped down, it's done. Whether you're ready for it or not, done. You know, it'll interrupt you mid-sentence, done. That's it. No more material. And everything you had a chance to develop spiritually, also done in this life. So you may as well start now. Urgency. Yeah, Prabhupada was like never compromising on that. Yeah.
Well, if you look at what's going on in the world today and looking how Kali Yuga is advancing before our very eyes, and how urgent it is for us to develop these practices as it becomes even more intense and more horrific. You know, I think Krishna is giving us these little like, this is where it's going, guys. Like, I'm showing you where it's at. If you want to keep following that, like, it's just going to keep getting worse. And so I think the time is now. So I think it's, again, sometimes it's a blessing to see kind of all this horribleness, because it really takes us to where it's like really, really important to do this immediately.
Right. Important to transcend and go beyond, and also important because devotees who take bhakti seriously also create healthier communities to live in the material world. While we're running out the clock, we need to like have healthy food and loving communities with relationships that support us, and clean air and water, and leaders we can trust, and all these things that are necessary for human life and civilized life. And all those things are falling apart in Kali Yuga because the foundations are rotten. But devotees who follow devotional culture and are also materially competent create and support functional systems to exist in that are also just better than the remnants of the lower modes, as well as transcending all of matter ultimately anyway and going to Krishna. So, bonus. All right, one more reflection, comment, or question?
I was just gonna add that, you know, the urgency is a pretty interesting concept in this age that we're living in, because if it's not coupled with sincerity, is it still useful and helpful, right? Like, that's where I'm kind of struggling a little bit with how do you balance, right? Like if you're not sincere in your practice and what you're doing and what your goals are, and you're just urgently trying to do all the things, but you're lacking, like, what's the point? Not what's the point, I don't mean it that way. I just mean like, are we really advancing if the urgency isn't balanced with sincerity?
Yeah. So like,
Interjecting.
yeah, so like an example I'm thinking is, for example, let's say you're chanting your japa and your mode is, I have to chant my japa. I got to get this done, right? That'll create, you finish your japa, I suppose, but it's not really like exactly, it's not a high frequency of devotional intentions. Like, I really want to see you, Krishna. It's like, I really want to get this done. I need to do this. It's necessary. It's an obligation. It's a duty, perhaps even a burden, right?
Mhm.
So would that qualify as something like an example of what you're talking about?
I think I'm looking at it even more like high level and just in general. Like if you're not approaching bhakti with sincerity and surrender and the right intention and mindset, it
But
just I struggle with balancing that with this sense of urgency that this is what we should be doing.
well, I kind of feel like they're almost the same thing, because how do you have um how do you have sincerity unless you're urgent? So in other words, I think there may be a certain degree of overthinking, but whatever we're lacking, whether it's sincerity or urgency, or if they are different or if they're the same, the bhakti process itself is sufficient, right? If we take to bhakti and we start to chant, we start to practice bhakti in association with devotees, we'll see, okay, like, yeah, my sincerity is wherever it is. It's over here, on a scale of like this much, it's over here somewhere. And therefore I have like this much urgency, but we're called on to cultivate more of that ourselves. But it's also a thing of like, I couldn't even see that until I was practicing bhakti, right? That vision itself of how I may be lacking sincerity or urgency is part of the gift of practicing bhakti at whatever level I'm practicing it right now. So you keep practicing and you try to increase in your quantity and quality, your guidance. And we become aware of, gaps in our sincerity or urgency, and we become empowered. Like this, these last two verses, these prayers, I was making the case that they're so impassioned, and they're so urgent, and they're so sincere because they're coming on the heels of the first 13 verses, which are just systematically laying out how it is. And when one sees that with no distraction, with no like lying to oneself, then urgency and sincerity hand in hand become inevitable, right? Arjuna, he couldn't pretend, he couldn't like force himself to be urgent and sincere. He had to. His life was so, the way things were going, it was falling apart. He saw there is really nothing I can do. I am actually completely painted into a corner here. I'm stuck. And it's not like we have to beat ourselves. Oh, I'm not sincere enough. I'm not urgent enough. It's like all we have to do is try to receive and let that touch our heart. When we receive the message that actually nothing in this world in and of itself will satisfy me. I want to be one with Krishna. We feel even a little bit of that. That's translogical. There's no amount of your own material logic that will get in the way of that realization that is, oh, actually, yes, this is true. I need Krishna. I want to be one with him. Automatically, you'll level up in your sincerity and urgency. It's not a material resource to be developed. It's not like a material muscle to be flexed. It's part of the natural process of bhakti. It comes with the practice.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's sounding more like, or where I'm coming from is like, I want everything I do in this practice to be authentic. And I think what you're saying is that as your faith grows, as your practice grows, the urgency sort of naturally comes with it that you want more. I think where I am is still trying to make sure that everything I'm doing feels as authentic
Yeah.
as possible, and that I'm putting as much of myself into it and not just, like you said, chanting 108 rounds to say I did it.
Yeah.
Sometimes you have to do that. It's not always gonna feel good, right?
Yeah, so it's like the way you can do that is by trying to apply yourself to whatever you've decided you should do, whether it's 1 round or 108 rounds or whatever, one syllable, one mantra at a time. Just put yourself in that. The purpose of structure and guidance is to help us to understand what we're capable of. So even on the days where I don't necessarily feel like doing it, I do it anyway. Just like if my gym and my workout exercise gym, coach says I should work out 3 times a week, go lift weights 3 times a week. I don't talk myself out of that. If I trust them, I do it. They know me, they know biology, they know my age, they know the exercises. I go 3 days a week. I just go do my exercises. Some days I feel like it when I go, some days I don't. That's sincerity too. Sincerity means trusting the process, trusting your guidance. Because otherwise, what are you trusting? You're trusting your mind. So many people make, January comes around, they make so many promises they're going to go to the gym. What happens in February? They trusted their mind. They didn't trust a trainer. They didn't trust higher authority. They didn't trust science. They didn't trust the feeling you get after months of working out where you feel great. They didn't trust all the people who've done it before them, their gym buddies. They trusted their mind. So our own capacity for so-called sincerity is also limited, right? That's why we need Krishna's help. So Krishna's help, taking Krishna's help also means just taking what the bhakti culture, bhakti processes, bhakti sangha has provided and applying that as much as we can, as best we can. That's all. And then just keep doing that bit by bit, more and more. Otherwise, we're trying to fix ourselves with the same imperfect mechanism that created the problems in the first place. Right? Hare Krishna. Okay, Jai. So for this week, read verses 14, 15, and 16, and please reflect in the WhatsApp what it means to you to ask for Krishna's face, to ask for him to reveal his face, or to see his face revealed to you, what that means to you. Okay? And next week, we will read the last 2 verses, which are, and I would say, even more impassioned, personal, intimate prayer, and the conclusion of the Isopanisad. Jai. Shri Isopanisad ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama, Hare Hare. See you on WhatsApp. See you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Hari Bol.